The 2024 fantasy football season is over. All that means is it's time to play some DFS. We're going to be covering all of the NFL playoff games, starting here with the wild card round. This week, today's video, the Green Bay Packers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Stay tuned. Oh, Captain, my Captain, this is Club Fantasy's DFS Showdown slate video. I am your host, Joshua Hudson. You can find me at the One Hudsonian. He is our DFS expert here at Club Fantasy. That is Austin Amandolia at Austin_FFL. Austin, ready for some more playoff football?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about a Super Bowl favorite here.
Ooh, saucy. Let's get into it. Remind everybody where they can play these DFS showdown slates, against us.
Yes, you can play with us on DraftKings. We have a league that if you follow the link in the show description, you can join and play every single one of these showdown contests with us. We will have contests for all 6 games this weekend. We also have a 2-game contest for the Saturday games and a 3-game contest for the Sunday games. So lots of options, lots of ways to try out DFS this weekend, see if you can take our money or just, have some fun.
The key word there, lots of ways to take our money. That's the one thing that everybody right here needs to know. Take some of that money and let's put it into Trophy Smack. Head over to trophysmack.com/WOFF. That's WOFF. Help us support women in sports with our sister site, Women of Fantasy Football. Use that unique link to get any and all of your achievement-based needs. You just won a fantasy football championship. So it's time to celebrate. Get that trophy, that ring, that belt, wall smack to decorate your office, your hallways, your kids' room. All of it is customizable. Blend it and cater it however you would like to do so. It's trophysmack.com/WOFF. That's WOFF. We've been lucky enough to be able to get passes to the Super Bowl this year. We're sending a group of ladies to go and represent us. We'd like to be able to give them more than just the passes. So anytime you use that direct link, trophysmack.com/WOFF, WOFF, we use those commissions to help them out. And from now until January 31st, get yourself a belt or a trophy, add a ring to your cart, use promo code WOFF, WOFF at checkout, and get that ring for free. Many different ways to celebrate your championships. trophysmack.com/WOFF, WOFF. All right, Austin, let's get into it. First category here, Captain Chalk. These, of course, are the names the chalky captains that everybody is likely to pick because they are just that damn good. Austin, he led the league in rushing this year, beating out a 1,900-yard rusher, but didn't get the rushing title because Philly chess, not checkers. Yes, we're talking about Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley has had an incredible season. And, typically we would not be that ecstatic about rushing yards for a full PPR website. But Saquon Barkley, we know, A, he also catches passes, but B, he gets so many rushing yards that it literally doesn't matter. We will happily take it anyways because he is almost a guarantee at this point to hit the 100-yard bonus, get you those extra 3 points. We've seen him have wildly productive games where he gets 250 rushing yards. Now, this is playoff football, so I usually wouldn't expect that. But Saquon Barkley, honestly, he could do anything in my mind at this point. I think he will be incredibly highly rostered. I think it's worth taking the chalk on that. If you have him, though, as your captain, it's going to be a little bit interesting how you decide to play the rest of your lineup because if he's scoring 2 touchdowns in this game, maybe the defense is viable for Philadelphia. We've seen Green Bay turn the ball over at times. I think maybe you get a kicker involved, but maybe you just lean into the passer catchers as well. I do think that building a full lineup that's coherent is a little bit tougher with Saquon Barkley as the captain, because he's probably going to be vulturing points from Jalen Hurts in that case. But I think it's still worth doing because he has that high upside where he could be the highest scoring player on the slate.
Well, friendly reminder that Saquon Barkley and the Eagles played these same Green Bay Packers in week 1, and Saquon scored over 30 fantasy points with over 130 yards total and 3 touchdowns. Not saying it's going to happen again, but I'm also not saying it. Just throwing that out there. All right, let's talk about some contrarian captain choices in our next section, the Mutineer. They offer some variety and upside in some of these larger tournaments. Let's stay on the Eagles side. You mentioned the fear, quote unquote, of going with Saquon Barkley is the fact that you may lose out to Jalen Hurts. He's missed the last 2 games, potentially coming back here off of a concussion. All signs are pointing to him being able to play. Why is he the contrarian? Because, well, let's face it, he does a lot of really good things himself, right?
Yes, he does. And I think the main reason I think he's contrarian in this case is because he is coming off of that injury. And I suspect that there will be some people that just shy away from him for that fact. I also think because it is such clearly a potential Saquon Barkley breakout game, they may say, oh, well, let's not put Jalen Hurts in the captain spot because Saquon Barkley is going to outscore him. But we have also seen that when Saquon Barkley falls at the 1-yard line, Jalen Hurts gets the touchdown. And there have been games where Jalen Hurts scores 3, like there was literally a game where he scored 3 rushing touchdowns because they fell at the 1-yard line 3 times and he got the ball every single time with that tush push. He also has been passing the ball fairly well. He has A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Now, I don't feel like Jalen Hurts is the type of quarterback like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen where you're going to bet on him and like 4 of his pass catchers doing really well. That's not really his style. That's not how the Philadelphia Eagles play either. It's a very condensed target tree. But I do think playing him in the captain spot and stacking him with one of his pass catchers, one of his receivers, and maybe a tight end is a totally fine strategy. But when you're looking at this matchup, I think that it's going to be one of the hardest things is that there's a lot of top heavy salaries because A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts are all so good. So you are going to have to get creative elsewhere, especially on the Philadelphia side. But I think Jalen Hurts is a totally fine captain to have because of the upside he has both on the ground and through the air.
Yeah, he could very easily throw 2 touchdowns and rush for 2 more, and Saquon could still go 130 plus in a touchdown. Like
exactly,
not out of the realm of possibility. So on the flip side here, talking about the Packers, your contrarian choice is, I would argue, probably their most consistent wide receiver, and that's Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, and I feel like even though he is their most consistent receiver, he's not the most interesting one that people like really flock to from a fantasy perspective. I think people will still want to play Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks more than they would Romeo Doubs. And so I really like going to Doubs, especially with Christian Watson out. I think Doubs becomes even more important at that point. Now, I will say I don't love the Green Bay side of this matchup in general because I don't feel like they really are going to be able to keep up with Philadelphia in this game. But if you have faith in Green Bay and you think that they are going to keep it competitive, I think that happens through Romeo Doubs as that volume hog. And he has the ability and he's shown like he can get those multi-touchdown games. So I think he's a totally fine contrarian pick to take, even though that he's maybe not the most flashy Green Bay receiver.
Yeah, the Green Bay offense is interesting because we've seen Jordan Love play really well in spurts. But this season specifically, they've leaned so heavily on Josh Jacobs that Jordan Love hasn't needed to throw touchdowns, which truthfully has really capped his ceiling in fantasy, but it's also capped the ceiling of the wide receivers as well. So it'll be really interesting to see against a really good Eagles secondary how some of these wide receivers and Jordan Love fare when it comes to fantasy points. Next category here is the first mate, because every captain needs a reliable crew. These are going to be the standouts that help maximize your lineups. Let's stay on the Green Bay side here. We talked about Romeo Doubs. Jaden Reed, for all intents and purposes, is probably the most talented wide receiver on the Green Bay Packers team, but there is zero consistency in his game.
Yes, there's zero consistency in his game. So reliable, maybe not the best word for him, but a good player.
He's priced that way. We'll call a spade a spade.
Yeah, he's priced at a decent spot, and I think it's worth having him in your lineup. Now, I'm not going overboard with him. I'm probably playing this as a 4-2 build where I have 4 Philadelphia players, 2 Green Bay players. So it's going to be between him and Romeo Dobbs for one of them, and then a cheaper Green Bay player, most likely for the other one. I do think the upside is there. And to your point about them relying heavily on Josh Jacobs, they do that when they're in neutral and positive game strips. But when they're in a negative game script, which I expect them to be in this matchup, I expect them to be playing from behind. They pass the ball way more frequently at that point. And so I do think even with a tough secondary, their pass catchers can get there just off of sheer volume. And Jaden Reed, he kind of gets these manufactured touches because he is a dynamic skill player. So even though he'll probably be matching up against Cooper DeJean and some of the tough cornerbacks in this matchup, I think they will find ways to still get him touches and get him high potential high efficiency opportunities to get yards, score touchdowns. So he's worth having in your player pool as a good option.
Yeah, and of note, Jaden Reed did score a touchdown in week 1 against these same Philadelphia Eagles. I'd also like to point out Cooper DeJean was not playing, or more importantly, not starting at that point. Cooper DeJean, the 4th highest graded corner per PFF this year. Just providing some information, people. The next guy in this section happens to be one of my favorites, but again, when you talk about AJ Brown, a lot of these high-end Eagles are very highly priced. So you might be stacking AJ Brown, maybe more so with a heavier Green Bay build.
Yeah, and if you're not doing that, you're punting off a cliff on the Philadelphia side and getting like Grant Calcaterra, who I'm not convinced actually has a major role in this, but I think it's still worth it because he's been involved to some degree. But AJ Brown, it's hard to argue against him. He's continued to be a vital part of this offense. There's not really much analysis here. He gets targets, he gets touchdowns. I will say I think you should play either him or Devontae Smith. And part of the reason I didn't put Devontae Smith here is because last time I brought up Devontae Smith on this show, Josh was like, "Oh, they only pass the ball to AJ Brown. They don't pass the ball to Devontae Smith." Well, they do pass them to both. They do have the upside, so I would just throw that out there. But AJ Brown is the number 1 receiver, and it is worth going after him in this matchup, especially because there's no Jair Alexander in this matchup, and so he's not going to have the number 1 cornerback on the Green Bay side to go against him.
Look, they had Jair Alexander in week 1, and it didn't matter. AJ Brown did the AJ Brown thing. So yes. I'm just saying, AJ Brown, certified dog. All right, next category here is the deck scrubbers. These are going to be the cheaper punt plays that can make or break a lineup based on one play or limited opportunity. Let's stay on the Eagle side. You kind of brought up Grant Calcaterra. I think it's really interesting seeing this name here because Dallas Goedert has been activated. He is playing. But to your point, Calcaterra has been very involved in this offense in place of Dallas Goedert since Goedert has been on IR.
Yeah, and this is really a salary thing. Like, it is so hard to play this matchup and get the studs in because of how expensive they are. And so as I was building lineups, it was like, really, who else am I going to play on the Philadelphia side at this price point?
Kenny Gainwell?
Yeah,
like and just hope that he gets garbage time if you think it's going to be a Philly blowout. Like
exactly, if you think it's a blowout, Gainwell, yes. But I was thinking like, oh, maybe he can Gainwell, but he doesn't get the ball unless they are sitting their starters, and so I went with Grant Calcaterra because my thinking here is, yes, Dallas Goedert is back, but if Philadelphia is smart, and I think they are, they're gonna work him back in. They're not gonna just put him back all the way at 100% in his first game back. They'll ramp him up a little bit. I think this is a game that they should easily win, so they have the opportunity to ramp him up in this matchup, which means Grant Calcaterra could still be fine. We also did see when Goedert was healthy earlier in the season, Calcaterra did get some touches in as well, so it's not unheard of that he will still have some involvement. It's primarily just a salary thing, as is the case with Bo Melton, who there's no telling what he's actually going to do. But I do think because there's no Christian Watson, it is intriguing to go with Bo Melton. And he does get more volume and more touches when there is no Christian Watson. And again, the salaries in this matchup are really tough. And so if you're trying to play a 4-2 build and have two Green Bay players, Bo Melton is like, to me, the best high upside pick that you can go with that's cheap on the Green Bay side. I mean, I could look at Malik Heath, but didn't love that. Emmanuel Wilson, don't really love that. It just felt like the best high upside opportunity at this price point in a really challenging salary environment.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think really with how you get, the higher priced options kind of leaning towards Philly because it's such a, funneled target share and opportunity, in the offense that you're almost kind of forced to go those cheaper options with Green Bay because they're a team that spreads the football around a lot more.
Yes.
And, maybe you can fit a Tucker Kraft in there with like a Dontavian Wicks or something like that. But those cheaper options, like you mentioned, the Emmanuel Wilsons, the Chris Brooks, Malik Heath, Bo Melton, like those are going to be the guys basically that you're punting and saying, give me a cheap touchdown in garbage time or something, because at that point, like that's ultimately what it's going to be. So, all right, one more time. You can play these DFS Showdown slates against us here at Club Fantasy. Hit the link in the description over on YouTube or wherever you are listening to your podcast. Come play with some fun people and try to take our money because, we are for the people. That is what we do. Our final segment here is the Kraken. These are the lineup traps that sink the ship. I love this first point. Not following the injury reports. Please, Austin, elaborate.
Yeah, well, this was a little bit more important when Jalen Hurts had not yet returned to practice, but I think it's still important to follow because if Jalen Hurts does not play, I do think it does change how you play this matchup. And concussions are nonlinear injuries, so he could regress. There is still the possibility that he practiced on Wednesday and then something comes up on Thursday and he ends up not playing this weekend. That's potentially unlikely, but I would still keep an eye on it because we really don't know. Concussions are tricky injuries to track. If there's no Jalen Hurts in this matchup, I honestly I do think it helps the pass catchers a little bit. I think it helps AJ Brown and Devontae Smith.
The only way that helps is if Tanner McKee is starting. Let's be real here because Kenny Pickett sucks.
But they both got so much volume with both of them at quarterback. Because there's less rushing happening at that point. Jalen Hurts isn't going to take any designed runs. Because Jalen Hurts isn't playing. Kenny Pickett's not doing design runs. Tanner McKee sure isn't.
And they're stacking the box to stop Barkley. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it does help the pass catchers, but it's definitely something to track. And it's primarily because of Jalen Hurts, because you don't want to end up in a lineup where you have him in your captain spot. And then it's like, oh, crap, he's not playing. The other
I would say real quick, when it comes to, injury reports and all this kind of stuff, especially with Jalen Hurts, to your point, when you said he hadn't returned to practice, Wednesday was the first day that they actually on-field practiced, hence why he, quote, didn't return to practice. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, exactly. There's something to keep an eye on. Something to not keep an eye on is Jahan Dotson. Don't play him. He did nothing.
Period.
He did nothing all season, and then he popped in week 18 because nobody was playing their starters. And it's like, oh, yeah, I remember he was good for Washington back in the day. Don't do it.
Such a waste of a third-round pick. Oh, why? Why? You didn't need wide receiver. Anyway, it's all good. It is what it is. Water under the bridge. We win a Super Bowl. It doesn't freaking matter. All right. With that friendly reminder, head over to trophysmack.com/WOFF. WOFF. Show some love. Help us support women in sports. Anything you buy, achievement-based, get those trophies from January. Now until January 31st, use promo code WOFF at checkout. Get yourself a free ring with the purchase of a trophy or belt. He is Austin Amandolia at Austin_FFL. I am Joshua Hudson at the One Hudsonian. Of course, follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL. The URL is clubfantasyffl.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. We will be dropping these Showdown slate videos all throughout the NFL playoffs to help you set some winning lineups and also probably take our money in the process. Subscribe on your favorite podcast network. All that is there. We appreciate the love and support. We're covering all of the wild card round games and, of course, the rest of the NFL playoff games throughout the postseason. See you on the next video.